It's September now, and we're just starting to see the change of the seasons, and the evenings are definitely getting shorter and shorter. And in just 2 months, it's going to be dark by dinner time. And that means if you go for a decent walk or a decent hike, then there's a fairly good chance it's going to be dark by the time you're finished. And so you're going to need to have a decent light. But what should you look for in a light for hiking? When it comes to walking or hiking, you want a light that is smaller and lighter rather than larger and brighter. But with advances in LED technology, even relatively small lights are plenty bright enough, and they're much brighter than kind of previous generations. So you're looking for a relatively small LED based light. I think one of the most important choices we need to make is something overlooked, and it really affects how your light performs. And that is, do you go for a torch with a short throw beam pattern, which is designed to be used sort of up close and into the medium distance and gives you a nice even spread of light, or whether you go for one with a long throw beam pattern that's been designed to throw a very tightly controlled spotlight as far into the distance as possible. And I think when we're looking for torches, we often look at the specs and think that we want to be able to see as far into the distance as possible. But the reality is by getting a torch that focuses on that, then those torches quite often aren't as comfortable to use up close, and that's where your attention's going to be most of the time. Now, you can get a happy medium. You can get a torch with a zoomable head, and that allows you to change it to a short throw to a long throw by either kind of moving the head in and out or twisting it. But in my own experience, because they have movable parts, those torches are less reliable, and they're more sort of prone to kind of moisture ingress. And so over a couple of years, they tend to become less reliable and break down. So in my opinion, I think you're looking for a torch with a fixed head that has been designed for the kind of short to medium distance. Now, one thing I always look out for is how variable the brightness levels are on the torch. And I'm more interested in how dim the torch can go than how bright it can go, because pretty much any decent LED torch is going to be bright enough for hiking now. And something like in the 500 lumens range is going to be absolutely plenty. But by being able to turn the brightness down, it means that you can extend the runtime of your torch dramatically, which can be really important. And it also means that it's more comfortable to use up close, for example, if you're reading a map at night. When it comes to the runtime of your light, you want something that's at least 4 hours, or enough to get you out of difficulty if you get lost and you need to find your way back onto the path and get you out of trouble. And in addition to being able to turn the brightness down to extend that runtime, the other key thing to look out for is what type of battery that light takes. Now, I'm a big fan of the rechargeable lithium-ion batteries because, one, they tend to store a lot of power, so they have really good run times anyway. They also operate at higher voltages, which means you can run brighter lights with them. And finally, they give you a nice consistent light output, which means the torch doesn't get dimmer and dimmer as you wear the battery down. There's one key issue with them though, and that is if you're going on a walk over many days where you can't carry enough spares, then there's a good chance you're not going to be able to find a replacement en route, because they're usually special order items. And the one advantage of the regular consumable batteries like AA is that you can pick them up from pretty much anywhere. And one thing I've learnt the hard way is always buy a light that has a decent waterproof rating. Because if you don't, what happens is as it gets exposed to the rain and even just the damp air sometimes, it will become unreliable and it'll eventually fail. And when you're out in the countryside in the dark, you definitely want a light that is reliable and something you can trust in all weathers. Now, if you do go for that waterproof light, the other thing to look for is get one that has internal charging with an induction plate and not a USB. If you see a USB one, give that one a hard pass. But if it's got a solid brass induction plate, they're 100% waterproof. There's no way water can ingress into that. And it means you don't have to constantly unscrew and rescrew the tail cap to take the battery out to charge it. Because by doing that, you can damage the rubber O-ring, which is designed to keep the water out. And even if it is waterproof initially, it could become unwaterproof through that action. Another choice you need to make is whether you go for a light that you wear on your head, like this headlamp, or one that you carry in your hand. And having a light that you wear on your head offers a lot of advantages, mostly to do with the fact that it keeps your hands free. So if you use trekking poles, or maybe you're scrambling over rough ground and you need to use your hands, or maybe just control a couple of dogs, then having your hands free is a massive advantage. But there are some disadvantages with these headlamps too. The first one is they're typically not as bright as a hand torch for the size that they are. For example, this little hand torch here is much brighter than this headlamp, which actually is quite big when you consider the back of it as well. The second point is where you can get very bright headlamps. This is a very bright one. Then in order to do that, they need to separate the front of the headlamp here with the battery pack on the back. And the reason they do that is to balance it out, because otherwise it would just fall forwards on your head, if that makes sense. But to do that, they have to split the two and separate it with a wire, which you can see here. And this wire is actually a weak point where it could actually fail. And just in general, because these have to be lightweight because of their nature, they tend to incorporate a lot more plastic, and that makes them a little bit less robust. On the other hand, if you go for a premium handheld torch like this one, then this is pretty much a solid block of metal, and this is going to take a lot of abuse. The downside, of course, with a handheld torch is you do need a hands-free in order to operate it. But if you go for a relatively small one with a pen clip like this, you can actually attach it to the peak of a peak cap and then kind of use it like a hands-free torch as well. And even if it doesn't have this pen clip, if it's a small enough torch, you can get separate head straps that you can attach the torch to the side of your head, and that's going to make it a little bit more versatile. Now, I'm a big fan of this particular torch. This is the Trustfire MC3, and for full disclosure, I was sent this to review last year, but I've been using it for well over a year now because I really like it and it is so useful. And if you're finding this video useful, please do give it a like below, because it really does help the channel. Having light when it gets dark in the countryside is so important to avoid slips and trips where you could injure yourself, and so it's always advisable to carry a spare battery. Now, these days, the LED torches tend to last a lot longer than the old incandescent bulbs do, but I still carry a spare, except now, because the LED torches are so much lighter than they used to be, I actually carry a completely spare light. And having two lights lets you choose two different lights with different characteristics to cover all of your bases. So a common combination for me is I'll have a headlamp which has a short throw beam pattern, so I can see everything kind of up close really easily. Then I'll have a handheld torch with a long throw beam pattern, so I can pick out the kind of trail markers and the signs in the distance and make sure I don't wander too far off the path. So I hope you thought this was useful. If it was, please think about subscribing, and hopefully I'll see you next time.